There's probably a diversity in like skill level. Who has used Anki before? Could you put your hands up? Okay. Who has used like close deletion flashcards, for example? You can put your hands up. Okay, so can those who are quite comfortable with Anki go towards the back and form small groups, probably around like 3 or 4? And can those who are new to Anki come to the front? So what I'll do is I'm going to be going through all the basics, going to be going through how to create the flashcards, going through different flashcard types, add-ons, and essentially in the back, we'll have a few more of the group discussions that you guys will do while we're doing this stuff. And those who are new to Anki will be going through some of the basics of how to use it. And also, we will all be covering some theory whilst we go about it. Okay, so maybe just like a minute to get organized. Okay. And those of you at the back, can you like form groups with people that you probably don't know as well, just to share ideas and share inspiration? Great, it's a very different turnout. Last time, a couple of weeks ago, I was doing something on Obsidian and pretty much everybody knew about Obsidian. And I was like, okay, now let me compensate for this. But it's good to hear that you guys are new. So if you guys haven't already, in the background, could you start downloading Anki on your computer? Ideally, if you can. And we'll get started. So, yeah.
Is it available on Linux?
Yeah. I believe so, yeah. So Anki essentially runs on the basic principles of spaced repetition and active recall. By the way, for you, those at the back, I'll tell you the questions to discuss after the theory sections as well. Spaced repetition ultimately is the fact that you are repeating and trying to recall a piece of knowledge over time. And there is very strong evidence that this shows to reinforce your memory incredibly strongly. But the spacing looks somewhat like this. The more times you recall a piece of information, it consolidates and strengthens that piece of knowledge within your memory so that it takes longer for that knowledge to decay. And essentially what spaced repetition algorithms that Anki do is they try to predict when you'll be forgetting a piece of knowledge and time the recall of that piece of knowledge or give you that flashcard at that particular point where you're most likely to forget. So essentially what you do is you turn memorization into an optimization problem. And that is trying to minimize the amount of time you need to use to be able to memorize the same amount of information. So with better algorithms, you can memorize more pieces of information in a given amount of time. So initially, I want to talk about where do we keep knowledge? So we can keep knowledge within our brains. That is, we can internalize knowledge. This is kind of where Anki sits. We can externalize knowledge. And this is like our notes that we might take, whether this be in like Obsidian or whatever else. And meanwhile, we can have the world at large. Like we don't have to keep the knowledge in our own personal knowledge base. We can just go to the world whenever necessary. So in internalization, we have things like Anki or the OG super memo. In externalization, we have, Notion, OneNote, these classic note-taking apps. You might also see things like Obsidian, and you might hear these buzzwords online relating to like second brain or Zettelkasten. Essentially, the idea is to try to externalize as much knowledge as possible, and you have a system that you try to make sense of the information, and through engaging in this kind of externalized system, you come to produce new forms of knowledge. And then you have the world, of course, Googling, Wikipedia, libraries, going and just asking a friend. You don't need to store all the possible information inside of your own knowledge base. If you need something and you don't really need it very often, you can just go to the world and ask it when you need it. So this process, though, is very expensive, and expensive in terms of time. Again, Anki and this whole thing, we're trying to look at memorization as an optimization problem in that sense, and trying to make trade-offs on what should be memorized. So taking information from the world and trying to put it in our personal knowledge base is very expensive time-wise. And of course, it leads to some internalization in that process as well. But the problem is, if we're simply externalizing this information, we are bound to forget it if we do not repeat it. Most of the things that we initially learn, the memory will decay over time. So going from externalization to internalization is, again, incredibly expensive. So this begs the question, like, what information should we be internalizing in the first place versus just fetching them on demand? When we need, can we just go to the world and ask it? Just like, okay, I need to know this person's height for some reason. Okay, I go and ask that. Or, I have a specific notation that I want to use for this one thing or a specific Linux command, right? Do I need to really internalize that? And then there's the other, okay? So we do have like these three pillars of where knowledge exists, but also we can also just construct knowledge on the go. But this is expensive. What do I mean by constructing knowledge on the go? You can use your existing knowledge that's internalized or your externalized knowledge or things in the world itself to be able to produce knowledge through reasoning and thought. You can think about the fact, let's say we're creating a robot. You have some kind of notion about like, how to program in Python. Externalization, maybe your knowledge base has some information about what are the components of a robot is. And the world, it might have like very specific detailed guides and maps on how to create this. You then follow this process and you put all this knowledge together to be able to produce a robot. And in that process itself, you start learning and producing knowledge that can be useful. And there's whole theories behind this. So that is kind of like internalization versus constructing the knowledge on demand. Again, expensive when it comes to time. So this is the first question for you guys at the back. What kind of knowledge should we even internalize? That is, you have to do the trade-off between the utility of the knowledge, like how useful is it? Like what is the short-term cost of actually fetching this knowledge on demand versus just constructing on demand? And what is the cost of actually internalizing this knowledge? And try to do these trade-offs to think about what knowledge should we even be internalizing with respect to our goals, right? And then I'll get some answers from you guys hopefully soon as well. All make sense? Okay, so let's get started with some Anki. This is me doing an Anki session, real portraits. So if you guys just all open up Anki, I will get started with showing you how to create flashcards. So you guys haven't used Anki before, most of you? First time, okay. If I skip over anything, just let me know, shout at me. Feel free to interrupt me. So you can add a flashcard by simply clicking add right here. You shouldn't see this. You should see something more like this. And then you can essentially create a question on the front. So let's do what is Parsa's birthday. Parsa, what's your birthday?
Know it by now. You have added to rank.
Yeah, but I haven't recalled the deck. It's in a deck that I don't use. It means that it means that I deprioritize that deck. I'm sorry. But what, your birthday, wait, 10th of December.
No, I don't
Is it?
Also recorded, but January 1, 1950.
Okay, sure, let's do that. January 1, 1st, 1950.
Super old.
So then we can basically add this card to the deck. And what we'll see is that when we go to the deck, we can click on it and then click study now. And it'll say, okay, what is Parsa's birthday? You click show answer or click spacebar and you'll see the answer. So what you try to do, of course, is recall the information, see if you remember it. And then depending on it, yeah, you can click one of these buttons. But realistically, the only ones you use are again and good. So you can kind of ignore hard and easy because it takes too much time to try think about, okay, how hard was this piece of knowledge to memorize? What I would recommend, and most people do, is if you recall the piece of information, click good. If you fail to recall it, click again. So let's say I forgot this, then I'll see it again. And again, this is like a deck with one card. Of course, with decks with more cards, this will become more apparent how things go. And I would click good. And then the timing and the spacing would change. So now you see that here it says 1 day instead of 10 minutes anymore. So now if I click good, this deck is finished and that card will be given to me tomorrow. So that's done. So the spaced repetition algorithm will automatically update the timings of when the card should be given. I think it would actually be useful to show it on my own deck. We could do something like French, because I'm trying to learn a bit of French, and do French to English translations. So I have quite a lot of cards that I do here. And if I click study now, okay, that's a very weird card to come up first. You do it, you'll click like good, and then you go to the next one and try to recall it, and carry on from there. So this will just continue and continue and continue. And it's something that you do quite quickly. It's usually like a 1 second, 2 seconds per flashcard. So it's very short flashcards. So it's quite useful there. So that is that. Let me just switch back to the normal profile. And you can also start creating decks inside of decks. So you can create a deck. Let's say this is called computer science. And then you can start creating decks which you can put inside. So let's say we want a part of computer science's logic. And I can drag this logic deck inside of computer science, right here. And then I can start adding flashcards into the different decks by, again, going to add, clicking deck. Instead of default, I can do logic. And then the benefit here is I can add some kind of card here. And afterwards, I only have to go, I can review that specific topic by clicking that deck, or I can review all of computer science, which automatically, using the algorithm, updates which piece of knowledge is has the highest priority for you to recall right now, for you to get the best bang for your buck in terms of time. Any questions so far? Okay. So the main thing is, though, that make sure you create flashcards after initial comprehension, because Anki is really useful for memorization. But active recall requires that you first understand the concept. So, you read through your notes, you start trying to formulate good flashcards. And after you formulate good flashcards, you will then be able to use it effectively for recall. Otherwise, there'll be a few issues in terms of its effectiveness. And I would say the beauties of Anki are, first of all, guarantee in memory. So it's very rare that in life we can just be like, okay, I want to memorize this, and it will just kind of like stick with you for the rest of your life. In Anki, if you engage with the algorithm, if you, in a sense, submit to the algorithm, right, it basically guarantees that you will memorize any piece of knowledge that you choose for the rest of your life. And this changes the way that you think about learning itself. So oftentimes before using Anki, I would be like, okay, I should repeat this. And you'll kind of have like this stress inside your head. You're like, okay, I'm doing this particular thing. Oh, I really should remember this. So you stop for a second, you stare at it, and you try to remember as much as you can. But then in Anki, the beauty is, okay, I understood this. And it's like, okay, I'll just put this in my deck and just trust that me engaging with this, I'll just naturally memorize this over time because the algorithm will take care of that for me. And that goes into the second point, the simplicity in study. Like, essentially, I don't have to worry about things. I pull out my Anki deck, I open up the deck, I open up the cards, I recall, and I memorize. You don't have to worry about things. You don't have to stress about things. You don't have to be like, okay, I have to come back to this tomorrow at this particular time to try consolidate my information. Essentially, the algorithm will time the things most effectively for you. And that's efficiency. These algorithms are very effective in trying to minimize the amount of time you have to spend for a given piece of knowledge. So I think that's that. Have you guys, maybe all of you can create a couple, like 2, 3, like maybe like 10 flashcards of a topic that you're kind of interested in, and just kind of get to grips with the system. Do you feel comfortable doing that? And I can come around and see if any of you have any questions or are having any problems. Yes. And then we'll have what is actually Anki. After you guys create a couple of flashcards, you can try and engage with the system. Click again, click good, and try to get to grips with the algorithm and get comfortable with it. But to be able to really,
That they can use for again and put to the advanced, like stage 1, 2.
yeah, but they have to get used to the thing first, I think. So like afterwards, you can click 1, 3 space to be able to go through the deck really, really fast. Just basically, once you get used to it and comfortable with it, you're looking at a flashcard for like 1.5 seconds, and you're just moving on again and again and again and again, and you do it really quickly. Yeah.
So what would be the first option, like difficult or like?
Yeah, 1 would be like again, basically the most difficult, and 3 would be like easy. Good, no, it would be good, and easy would be 4. Yeah. Space is just next or show answer. Yeah. So all those 3 buttons are all you need. In fact, like the medical students, like sometimes I see them, they have like these Anki remotes they buy, and they map the Anki remotes to like the buttons, and they just like sit back and just like click on their remote like they're playing games. But like they learn their entire curriculum in Anki because they have like a lot of declarative knowledge. So yeah, you could, but I think like they're like spending like 6, 7, 8 hours a day on Anki, and they're just like, I saw them in the library as well. They just like kind of sit back and they just yeah. But I don't think EPFL doesn't have any medical students, does it? No? No, okay.
So like Union has.
You know.
Union has all the medical students.
Yeah, I see.
Surely they might be someone from Union here. Anyone from medical related areas there?
Yeah, wait, what kind of domains are you guys from? Like computer science? Most computers, okay, so. Okay, so group at the back. Oh.
Yeah.
So let's hear the answers that you guys have to what kinds of knowledge should we internalize? What are the conclusions you guys came to? Share with others.
Okay, so in the beginning we were getting a little bit general, so thinking that every time you go towards this external bucket of knowledge, it takes some time, it costs a little bit. So all of the knowledge that we can't really afford is cost for, which is going to be a vocabulary when we're learning a new language, anything we need to sort of know by heart. So apart from this general language learning, it could also be about sort of the story that we live in, so everything is related to meaning and purpose. And then we were discussing for a while about creativity, and it seems at least to me that if we want to be able to come up with new ideas, we can only really make use of our creativity if we already have a lot of building of knowledge that is there.
Yeah, for sure. I think the creativity is a huge argument, and it's probably one of the biggest downsides of all the second brain Zettelkasten thing that I'm saying. Like if you're externalizing all the knowledge you have inside of a node base, well, you have to start reading that and then loading it into your brain to be able to start into your like short-term working memory to be able to have a chance of creating a new idea. But of course, your working memory is very, very limited. And hence memorizing a lot of this information is really valuable for like these higher order tasks. One of the criticisms that Anki gets is that it's always focused on like the super low level, lower order tasks, like, you know, vocabulary, but this memorization, it should not be seen as just like the bottom level of learning. It is fundamental to the higher levels as well. But yeah, good insights. It's nice. So I guess we'll talk a bit more about knowledge types then and the Anki ability of these knowledge types. So you can't Ankiify social skills. Well, probably. If you could, I would have social skills. But the general type of knowledge that Anki values is something called like constant knowledge. What I mean by that is a constant application domain, that is the area which it appears always stays the same, and a constant response. Like when you're doing these flashcards, the application condition, that is the front side of the flashcard, is the same, and the response, the back side of the flashcard, is the same, right? So again, this is very useful when it comes to things like vocabularies. And let's say you have, trying to, what are the effects of a particular drug? Like I just said about medicine, is very effective for being able to get that kind of cause effect relationship memorized within your head. But again, this is a precursor to be able to use it in practice. You need to know it in your head quite easily. And like here, even the medical school Anki subreddit has more members than the actual Anki subreddit. So this is how much is used in medical school. Historical facts, not really the historical reasoning processes, but to be able to memorize the basic facts at least. And also terminal commands, these kind of different things that you need to know all the time, you're using all the time. And you don't want to be able to do a Google search every time you need to use it. Well, it depends which ones. If you're using a command, every once in 2 months, then maybe not. But a lot of instantiations of constant, that is, if you create a lot of flashcards representing an underlying piece of knowledge, like a piece of grammar that you're trying to learn, can be a proxy to variable knowledge types. That is the more complex things that we engage in life. How you use vocabulary, or how you use grammar, or how you use, like a formula that you might have learned. It's usually variable in that the condition, the question that you use the formula in, changes a lot of times, right? And the outcome from where you're using the formula also changes. But the thing is, if you instantiate it a lot of times, that is, for example, create a lot of questions, that's what we do, right? Do a lot of questions, apply the formula over and over again across a bunch of different conditions. And our mental models start developing some notion of like this variable knowledge. But the problem with Anki is that it can be time consuming to turn it into an Ankiable format, right? So it's always, again, managing that trade-off in terms of the amount of time it takes to convert it into a relevant format versus how much learning and gains that we get from it. And also, I want to note that spaced repetition happens naturally in life. Like this is kind of how humans were built, right? That we see things over and over again. Okay, if we see things over and over again, they're probably more important, and therefore our brain memorizes it better. So certain pieces of information we might not need to memorize so much because we can be pretty sure that we will see this again, right? And hence I can just trust that through my engagement with life, I will naturally come to memorize this. I don't need to put this in my Anki deck. So the next question for you guys at the back. So what do and could you use Anki for? So consider the trade-offs before that we talked about, the kind of knowledge we should even internalize, which Anki is really useful for. But think about the fact that Anki has trade-offs, that is the static knowledge. Of course, it's a proxy to variable, but we can only do like the static knowledge. And hence Anki should be a subset of what we hope to internalize. And we'll carry on with more complex flashcards. So we're going to go over close deletion, community add-ons with image close deletion, and note types. Again, I'm moving pretty fast here in terms of Anki, but the idea is that if you want to really get to grips with Anki, you'll have to use it, like sit down for an hour, try process a text, maybe like a lecture or some sort of things, try to create a bunch of flashcards from it and try to engage with those flashcards over the course of like a week or 2 weeks. But here I'll at least show you some of the different kinds of flashcards and different tools that you have. So you'll have an intuition about what you need to use. So the difficulty with a lot of knowledge is turning it into a question answer format. It can actually be a real pain to try to turn everything into question answers. I might want to memorize something, but it's just like, it takes too much time or mental effort. And close deletion, a very fancy term to say, fill in the gaps. So let's say I am reading a blog by Parser right here, an amazing blog, Inner Loops. Let's see, the speculations about the Apple event. And let's see what it says. Or maybe like what we heard on September 9th. So he says that in a future where all people have headphones in their ears and with real-time accurate translation models, language barriers will cease to exist. So I'm going to copy this piece of information. I'm going to go back to my Anki deck. I'm just going to add this in default and click add. And this time, instead of just clicking basic, I am going to click close. You should see close right here. And then after I click close, I can basically paste my text right here. And the thing that I want to memorize, let's say with...
Have something. Headphones in their ears could be the thing that's on there.
Yeah, but that is kind of obvious, right? But I think maybe the real-time aspect is more important. So maybe I want to memorize or like just get to grips with the idea of like real-time being useful for language barriers ceasing to exist. I can make this into a closed deletion flashcard. You can do this by clicking this button right here. There's also, you can just write it manually. And this essentially makes this a fill in the blank kind of question. I can also add it to another place just to give an example. So I'm just going to add it here as well and click this button. And this should create 2 flashcards out of it. So I click add. And now if I go to my default deck where I added it, I have here, in a future where all people have headphones in their ear and with real-time accurate translation models, language barriers will cease to exist. Click good, and then the other one as well. Good, and then usually the algorithm gets you to repeat it twice in a day. You don't see it like this. I have a very small example. When you see it with like 100 different cards that are being interspersed, it feels much more natural. And then you click good, and then now it'll come back tomorrow. And then maybe 3 days later. If you get it wrong, then maybe the next day. And then if you get it right, then maybe a week later. And according to what the algorithm has come with. Does that make sense? So this is really useful if you're reading a blog and you don't want to turn everything into a question answer. It just takes a lot of time. I just copy the thing in and just add a bunch of close deletions all over the place for the things I believe are kind of important or the things I feel like I would forget. And that information is just like reinforced in my brain. And I find that it really helps with like ideation and creating connections between topics. So I have my like knowledge base kind of in Obsidian with it. If you guys have heard of Obsidian, it's like a link-based like knowledge management system. And then with those ideas, it helps me create like links between different types of thoughts and topics.
I have a question.
Yes?
With the LLMs and everything, the process of generating those question and answers could be automated or at least facilitated. Then the argument that you said question answer takes time might not be necessarily valid. So is it still worth it to use close and not convert them into questions?
I think
It's a genuine question.
Yeah. There are quite a few plugins that help with like there's quite a few like add-ons.
Like you just copy the paste into ChatGPT and ask it to provide the question answer, and then you add those to like.
Oh, that's even like too time consuming for me. Oftentimes I don't want to spend time doing administrative stuff. If I have to put it into ChatGPT, then copy and paste each question one by one, it's not so nice. But now, for example, if I browse my flashcards, like let's go back to, so if I click browse, you can see your cards, but you can turn them into notes instead here. So here, let's say I add a few more. I'm just going to add a few more close deletions because usually I might put a paragraph like 5 close deletions. Here you go. This is automatically 4 different flashcards. It's very nice. It's very convenient. It's very easy. It speeds things up a lot. But also the idea is if you're formulating as question answer, it's worth taking a bit more time to think about, like, you want to formulate flashcards in a way that matches the way that your brain thinks. So if any of you have experimented with a few things relating to mnemonics, essentially you memorize knowledge best when it matches kind of like your mental models. Of course, me just copying and pasting something and then using close deletion is not like that. But if you're going to go through the efforts of using question answer anyway, you might as well try to formulate it yourself. Unless it's very simple things like vocabulary, which don't really need that. So you can just download that off the internet. Okay, so that's close deletion. You can also do image close deletion, which requires a community add-on. So Anki is quite an established piece of software. I know it looks very ugly. It needs a facelift, but it's quite an advanced piece of software under the hood compared to a lot of others. So if you click tools at the top and click add-ons, and you click get add-ons right here, and then click browse add-ons, the tool is pretty annoying at times. You can see a massive list of add-ons that people have created that do all kinds of specialized things, whether it be like very specific flashcards to help you with a very specific topic, or things that turn Anki into a game. I think someone did something relating to like turning Anki into a Pokemon. Oh, there's Ankimon. I think they tried to turn it into like a Pokemon style game, which is quite fun. And all kinds of other things. We're going to do the same close deletion, but with images. I find this quite nice. So if you just search up image occlusion, that's a flashcard. And you click image occlusion enhanced. This is quite a nice flashcard. Sorry, a nice add-on. And then if you scroll down and then copy the code from it. And by the way, you don't have to add it. You can just watch me do it if you want. You paste the code, you press OK, and you add. I already have it, so I'm not going to. You'll have it right here. And then what I can do is I can create a image occlusion card, which is basically close deletion with images. So let's say I wanted to memorize Parser's favorite, Bloom's taxonomy, and all the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy.
Can you quickly explain what this is?
This is a really bad learning science theory that you should never use, which everybody seems to love for some reason because it's easy to cite.
That's quite a different type of knowledge that you can have. Some knowledge is like remembering, understanding, applying.
Yeah,
Nowadays people don't use that much.
people don't use it that much. Come on. Cutting edge research technically uses this, and it's not good. It kind of sees remembering as like the most basic primitive form of learning, as if it's, you know, like creating is like the highest form of learning. I don't know. Anyway, we can talk about the issues there another time. But if you click this button right here, for those who are following along, you can then simply just draw these kind of boxes around the things you want to memorize. And let's say I want to memorize each one of these. And I'm just going to change the setting here to say hide one, guess one. Right here. Yep. I click add. And you will see that in our deck, it will then give a kind of red box right here where I can try to say, okay, what is this? Oh, I know what this is. This is remembering. Next. And so and so. Again, this is all in one row, so it doesn't really make sense. But when this is interspersed with like, you know, 100, 1,000 different cards, it will come at you just like one day when you're sitting somewhere, when you're just like using Anki, and you'll be like, okay, what is this particular level going to be? And you'll try to recall it. And then over time, when that happens, your memory will really solidify and strengthen. So it makes taking notes again quite easy. Like it might not be if you value this knowledge enough that you feel like you should memorize it. It's quite nice. The other type is notes type. So again, I think perhaps before going on to this, because you guys are a bit new to this, maybe you can get some practice. So maybe open up a blog post or an article that you think is quite interesting. I have a few links in the QR code that you scanned at the beginning. Like there's 3 links to different like blogs that talk a bit about like Anki and spaced repetition in general. You can use that if you want. And try create some close deletion flashcards. And try go through it and see if you can memorize what it says. And again, most of the benefits of Anki you'll see through engaging with it over time, because that's the core principle, spaced repetition. I guess good to move on, or want more time? Okay, I guess we'll carry on. So note types as well. You can start creating like custom note types. So you can go to add, not add, browse, and under note types, at the bottom left, you'll find it. You can right click, click manage note types, and then click add. and just click add basic. So just to repeat that, I will do that one more time. So bottom left of browse, note types, right click, manage note types, just add a basic one. So click add. And then here I'll say add basic, just click OK again. And I'm just going to call this one people. So I'm going to create a note type that represents what a person is, I guess. So afterwards, you can click on people and then click fields, after which you can start customizing these fields. So, well, what does a person have? Well, they have like a first name. They also have a surname. They have a date of, let's say, date of birth. They may also have like, you might also store like, okay, how we met. Just to be able to memorize this kind of information about something, about a person, and so on. Maybe interests as well. We can add another one. It's gonna delete this maybe. Okay, and we can keep this as so, and click save. Afterwards, so that's fields that you just edited. And now you can create cards from that. So the idea is a note represents kind of like an entity. I'm not sure if any of you done object-oriented programming. You can kind of think about it like that. And then cards are kind of instantiations that you create for specific things. So I might create a card, which is like, what is the date of birth on the front template right here of, and then I'm just going to write name right here. Okay, no field called name. Oh, sorry, it was first name. Yeah. So what is the date of birth of first name? In the back template, I could write in the answer the date of birth as so. And you can create more flashcards like this. So I can create another card type, which is perhaps relating to what are their interests. So what are the interests of first name? And then in the back template, you'll have interests. And you can customize this. Here, you can actually, since you're making card types, you can start using HTML. You can start doing all this kind of processing. You can start doing more interesting things here if you feel like it, to be able to create a more interesting mapping of the types of knowledge you want to memorize about this specific entity, whether it be a person, whether it be a formula, whether it be a grammar rule, whatever else it could be. And then once I save this, just like normal, I can create a card about them. So I click type here and you'll see people. I should have called that person. I'm just going to ignore front and back. I didn't delete them. And then I can just say, okay, Bob, John, strange name. 1st of 1st, 1950, same birthday as Parser. How we met, I guess, I don't know. Sorry? Okay. Through ML course, let's say. And their interests are coffee. And I add this. Oh, okay. I should have deleted these. I'm just going to put dash dash for now. But you can delete the fields as well. And now that this has been added, you will see that this note right here is then mapped into 2 different cards. So these cards, you'll see properly when we actually go through them. So I'm just going to quickly, okay, what are the interests of Bob, you'll see. Okay, coffee, nice, and so on. So you can create all kinds of entities to be able to customize the things that you are learning about. And you can also just download these note types from the internet as well for different things that different people have created. So again, when it comes to like medicine, for example, there's a lot of note types to be able to help with memorizing all kinds of things like relating to like drugs or particular diseases and so on. Oh, okay, I just closed Anki again. And yeah, do you guys want to try that? Or not sure if you understood everything? If so, you can try create a note type as well. Okay, I guess good to continue. Nice. So good flashcards. Most people, when they start Anki, start putting way too much knowledge on each individual flashcards. Flashcards should be super tiny, like have very little amounts of information kind of on it in terms of what you want to memorize. Because you want to try and minimize the amount of information and just churn through the flashcards very quickly and let the algorithm be able to space when to repeat things. Otherwise, you're repeating things you already know. This happens a lot when we're learning. We spend a lot of time doing the things that we already know again and again, meanwhile not spending time on the things that we do not know. But I would recommend checking out this article. It is like probably one of the foundational articles. 1999 is the guy that I was talking about over here, super memo, Piotr Wozniak, crazy guy, basically created this whole thing about like spaced repetition algorithms. Anki is based on his algorithms that he created a long time ago. I think Anki for such a long time was created on the algorithm that he created when he was like a PhD student or something, which is like ridiculous. And he writes a lot of interesting stuff about how you should format knowledge. I think I already told this, do not learn if you do not understand, learn before you memorize. But also this one is a key one. Stick to the minimum information principle. Keep as little knowledge as possible on a flashcard. Otherwise, the whole idea of spaced repetition algorithms breaks down. You can see an example here. Oh, let me just full screen or not. So yeah, what are the characteristics of a dead sea? You could write this all in terms of one flashcard. This is not very useful for recall. This is maybe more for reasoning. Instead, you can turn it into a bunch of question answer flashcards like so. You would think this takes more time or more effort in terms of like memorization, but once you do it, it's much faster to be able to get through. And you'll really target your time towards the information you do not know. So like you might already know the average sea level, but you might not know the length that well. If you're doing this one, you have to say the whole thing again and again and again. And so on. You'll see close deletion, easy and effective. This is the one that I mostly use most of the time. And then you get into kind of more the learning sciencey things, which are like imagery is very useful for our brain to be able to remember things. Mnemonics, basically a whole field of how to memorize better. Graphic deletion, that's the image close deletion I was showing you, and so on. So you could even try read this article, I would say in your spare time, and turn it into a Anki flashcard deck, just to try get the hang of things of like, how should we create flashcards in the first place? Because if you try to, initially there's a bit of a learning curve to Anki in that you will get like really good payoff returns in terms of how effectively and how efficiently you can learn things. But you'll have to put in some time and effort into learning, first of all, how do we create good flashcards and how do we use Anki and structure around our life in such a way that it can actually work for us rather than us kind of like bashing our heads against the wall. And most people go through a small process at the beginning, like a small learning curve, and so on. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of that. And instead, I'm going to return to the people at the back and ask you, what do and could you use Anki for? I know the conversation slightly diverted. So any insights or epiphanies you can bestow upon us?
You can mostly use it for things you can anticipate well, which falls again into the categories of language learning that we also figured out. I mean, exams are obvious, but for interviews, sometimes you can anticipate questions and you want to rehearse it, maybe use spatial repetition if you have many interviews. And then we also thought about like the specifics of each category, like for example, for language learning. You could think about what are actually facets of words, like if it's a verb, maybe you want to know specific grammatical tenses or forms of it. Can you create multiple cards of a note? But yeah, mostly things you know that you're gonna use them at a time, and we use it, I think, actually most for languages discussion.
Okay, interesting. I actually have, I definitely agree with you, but I have a slight counter argument, but this is for a topic I'll talk about soon in a second. Any other points from the discussion that you want to share? Okay, I guess, yeah, go on.
Yeah, Yeah, no, maybe just an example of language learning where we spoke about concepts. Sometimes there is a complicated word, and then you can just put in what that means, even if it's in the language that you know pretty well.
Yeah, that's for sure. It works very well for like just being able to get direct translations of meaning and understand things. So I guess one assumption that's made here is that you need some kind of like well-defined notion of knowledge. You need to have some kind of like curriculum or syllabus. You know, the amount of vocabulary you have in a language is kind of like a predefined syllabus in some sense. You can go online, search it up, and map it. But recently, I've been finding Anki. I use that for, I do learn French with Anki as well, so I definitely do agree. But I've been using Anki a lot more for things that are not so well defined, particularly just reading blog posts or like watching YouTubes. As you go about life, you engage and read a lot of different content. But most of what you learn, you kind of just forget straight away. Like, imagine you're reading a book, and maybe I'll go to actually incremental reading in a second. I'll come back to this. Is that you kind of read a chapter of your book, and then by the time you're on the next chapter, how much of the previous chapter do you really memorize? Do you really remember? Right? And you might have some kind of vague notion of understanding, but oftentimes you don't really come back to it. You don't really space it. You don't really repeat it. So it's kind of gone. It's actually very inefficient. Like people think that, okay, we make flashcards, we try to repeat flashcards. It takes a long time. But per amount of knowledge that we gain, I would say is one of the most efficient forms. And what I've been doing a lot recently is, okay, if I'm reading a blog post, watching a video, going through it, there's something I do not know, something that's kind of not so well defined. And it's just like, oh, aha moment. I take that and I just turn it into a close deletion flashcard and just let it live there, just copy paste. And this is interesting insight. I hope I'll come back to this. And incremental reading more so is like methodology. I think I was telling you guys over here about it. Crazy barefoot guy, I say Piotr Wozniak, guy who created this whole thing, about like what he thinks is the next evolution of like spaced repetition. In that he kind of created this whole thing and all this computerized spaced repetition algorithms. And he believes that the system that he does is like, he reads like 1,000 different things at the same time, right? Like imagine you're reading, instead of just one book and reading it start to end, he reads maybe like 100 or 1,000 at the same time, maybe spends like 30 minutes or 50 minutes on one thing. While he engages with that, he creates a bunch of flashcards to really memorize and understand the pieces of knowledge he believes are meaningful from that. And after he does that, it automatically enters his spaced repetition deck. So as he goes about life, that piece of knowledge from that specific article is really well encoded within our brains. So the next time we come back to it, like 2 months later, we already know the prior knowledge incredibly strongly, probably even more strongly than we would have known from on the spot of reading it, such that it will help us develop and make sense and make connections with the next stuff in the article. So by breaking down our reading into very, very small segments, and if we don't have the limitation that we have to read this all in one day, we can make much stronger memory consolidation and networks and links between topics. But I think it's kind of like compatible though with what you guys were saying as well. But I definitely agree that well-defined knowledge, if you have a well-defined set of knowledge, Anki is amazing for us. But this is kind of, I guess, more than that. Like if you're trying to learn random things as you go about life, usually some of the most useful pieces of knowledge are the ones that are not really well defined in the curriculum. But anyway, so if I was to carry on, so talked about good flashcards, integration into life. So this is another thing. How do we integrate Anki into life? Do we sit down on a computer like a normal study session and use it? Well, actually, no. And I think this is one of the best advantages. I already talked about the fact that Anki is very, very efficient in a lot of cases. But one of the best things is that it's super simple, like the simplicity in how you study it. Usually I just open up my phone and just do some flashcards. And where I do that is, okay, I'm drinking a bit of coffee in the morning. Okay, 2 or 3 minutes of flashcards. It's not like I have to reach a certain endpoint, right? And then, okay, I'm commuting. I do flashcards. I'm standing in a line. Okay, good opportunity. Maybe just do some flashcards. At the gym, maybe just do some flashcards. So the areas like of time that you're actually using are often the time that you're just like spending scrolling on like social media or something. So it's not only efficient, but where you incorporate Anki can make it much like beyond efficient. You're just making use of time you would have wasted anyway, unless of course you would have done something that you find really enjoyable. Let's say you're like watching a video on the commuting and you find that really enjoyable, then fair enough. Yeah. So I guess to end with reflection, do you think Anki is useful? Will you integrate into your life? If so, how will you integrate into your life? And this time, everyone can get in small groups and discuss if you're okay with it. So if you can just like talk to your neighbors, maybe groups of 3, 4, that's good. And just your general opinions about what you've learned, whether you think it's useful, and what you might use it for in your actual like specific like context, right?
Your lesson slide?
I'm not going to talk about incremental reading too much more because we're out of time. I guess it also points to the fact that a lot of things are personal. Like some kinds of knowledge we might struggle with more than other people. So what you decide to ultimately use it for would depend on what you value in life. Do you value memorizing people's names? Also, how bad are you at memorizing people's names? I'm definitely very bad as well, so I do use that. But it's a very good point. Thanks. Go on.
Question to you both, or all the people that try to memorize names, and like, what is the type of information you enter to like get to the name?
For me, what I did was like, I'm not sure if I should give an example. That'd be weird. Okay, TLDR. I knew that, okay, there was someone who was in the lab opposite us and who I chatted with over coffee once. So I was like, okay, I know that situation and circumstance, and I know I won't forget that if I see that in the question part. And I didn't want to just, go around Googling people and like copying their images into my deck. That's just a bit, I don't want to be like a stalker or something. So I just wrote like the context, kind of like how I know this person, or like some kind of qualifying feature of how I know them. And then I was like, okay, now I memorize his name and I know his name. So yeah. Okay. Any other points, or should we have pizza? Oh wait, quiz first. Okay, sorry.